Robert Scott. I enjoy your talks a lot. Your recent foray into Gnosticism was fascinating. I wanted to ask you a question regarding the self-destructive nature of cult leaders. Last summer, I did a pile of video research on Hubbard, Nixon, and Jim Jones, looking for common threads. One conclusion I came to was that there seemed to be a feedback loop created by the escalation of belief by followers and the escalation of self-loathing of the leader, that in Jones's case led to mass deaths. It seemed like Jones' own awareness that he was a fraud is what made him order the mass suicide, i.e., better to kill everyone than be exposed and disappoint. But at the same time, it seemed Jones also had deep resentments toward his followers, that they were dupes for believing in him, so it was fine for him to punish them. My question is there a name for this kind of syndrome, and do you think Hubbard resented his followers in a way for not seeing through him? Hey, thanks for the question, Robert. This is a great question. Very insightful one. And because I think there is something to this. And in fact, I know there's something to this. The name for this, by the way, isn't really any more complicated than narcissism. At least as I see it right now. There might be, other names for this, but when you have a leader knows he's a fraud, knows he's a fake, and he's pushing his stuff anyway, and people believe him, and more people grow to believe him as he improves his sales talk, he improves his methods, he uses more and more thought controlling mechanisms. As this develops, I think almost anyone would start to feel a bit of contempt towards the people who are buying into the bullshit because he knows it's bullshit. Now, this tends to be a bit of a question for cult leaders as to do they really believe their own nonsense or not? I think that is not really a super important question as far as the abusive nature of cults, but I do think it's an important question if you're trying to answer this one about self-loathing and about how they feel about their followers. If a cult leader truly believes they are a true believer in their subject, then they're not going to feel compelled to hate on their followers because they're a bunch of dupes, because they're going to think the same. They're going to all be on this same page of belief. See, it's not just cult leaders that this phenomenon occurs with. I was listening to Anthony Jeselnik talk to Joe Rogan about comedy on a podcast a few months ago. Jeselnik is a comedian I actually really like, but he made a very curious and interesting comment during the podcast, which Joe did not follow up on. He just kind of laughed and agreed with him about it, and I was a little disturbed by it actually, because they kind of came to this agreement on this point where Jeselnik said, don't you find yourself kind of hating the audience after a while? And Joe was like, yeah, and it wasn't really like, they didn't really go into it in too much more detail. And I was very curious about that because he kind of gave this impression. I don't remember everything Anthony said exactly, but he definitely gave me the impression that after a while, you talk to crowds and crowds and crowds of people all over the country. Some comedians go international, and you see all these people, and you've tailored all these jokes, all these, terrible, some jokes, really horrible things to say. They're just kind of funny, goofy stuff, but nobody's taking it seriously. And I'm not making value judgments about comedians here. I'm saying that it's an interesting thing that a comedian would come to just start hating on the audience. Like, what's up with that? And he never really did say why, and I really wanted him to pursue that question. And I haven't seen Jeselnik take it up since. But I guess after a while you start, from what I understood, from what the impression I got from what he was saying, and I'm tying this directly back into the cult leaders as well, is you realize that you are manipulating people. Comedians manipulate people. They get you to laugh. That's manipulation. It's not bad manipulation, but it's still manipulation. And cult leaders manipulate people by getting them to believe something and by getting them to support the cult leader and go along with what the cult leader wants. It's a whole different level than comedians, of course, but there is manipulation going on there. And I wonder if there isn't, after a while, some degree of like, these people, they're so easily manipulated. They're sheep. I can just do this and this and look what happens. And I am pretty sure that comedians, as an example of a class of people, are people who would make amazing psychologists or sociologists. I bet you that you could have some very interesting conversations between comedians and sociologists about how people in groups act, or with psychologists for how individuals, what they find funny, what they don't, where are lines drawn, where are values, this kind of thing. And I think that's in perfect alignment with cult leaders. And again, I'm not saying they're the same thing at all. I'm not even trying to draw, anything other than a comparison between in terms of manipulation. But this is a thing. I wonder if motivational speakers start hating on their audiences a little bit, because you find that human beings are way, way more malleable in group settings than anybody wants to actually really believe. I think magicians, mentalists actually are the ones who are the most upfront. Darren Brown, for example, I think these guys are the most upfront about this kind of phenomenon. And even Darren Brown, anybody who thinks that he's just being completely straightforward with you guys, like, no, he's got all kinds of curves he's throwing in. So I think that's kind of where it comes from, is that realization that people are malleable in ways that people themselves don't even believe. They don't want to believe it, but they are. So I think that might be where that kind of comes from a little bit. And cult leaders being an extreme example of people who are manipulating other people for very nefarious reasons. Let's be super clear that, intent matters. Again, context matters. So with cult leaders, they are taking such advantage of people. They are literally abusing people physically, psychologically, sexually, socially, so financially. So they have to hate on these people. They're even as a true believer, even if you really believed in everything that you were saying, well, everything you're saying, but even if you are a true believer, like, okay, let's say Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard believes in the ARC triangle and the tone scale, and all the crap he talks about with the reactive mind and auditing and body thetans and all that. Even if he believes in all of that, even Hubbard had to know, something's really wrong with these people, that I'm able to just throw them off the side of a ship. Or they let me lock their 4-year-old kid in a chain locker for days. I think Hubbard got to the point where he just started pushing it just to see how far he could push it. And in fact, that was a trait Hubbard had right from the beginning, that people who would eventually leave Scientology would accuse him of. And Hubbard joked about it, in lectures sometimes, that people would accuse him of, I think you just do this or say this or push this out there just to see how far you can push. And I think he did, and I think he was telling the truth there, So anyway, so I think it's it's probably a nuanced thing, and but I hope the comedian example sort of gave or contrast, gave a fuller understanding of what I'm trying to say here. I hope this got across. And anyway, and there you